Yeah.
Today, I'm joined by Brennan Decima, founder of Decima Wealth Consulting. Brennan helps families and business owners retire confidently with a focus on turning complexity into a clear plan. What makes Brennan especially interesting is that after 16 years at one of the largest investment and wealth management firms in the world, he went independent, building a fiduciary-first firm designed to be more personal, more transparent, and more actionable. Brennan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity. Looking forward to this.
Yeah. So, look, you've advised thousands of people over your career, I assume now. What's uniquely hard about planning for business owners?
Yeah, so I think with business owners, it's a completely different conversation in the sense that individual personal planning is just very siloed, right? So we're thinking about income and we're thinking about how to generate that income, right? And then the investments fall into that. But with business planning, there's just so many more, in most cases, stakeholders and contingency planning. So I think the key here is understanding what the vision for the business development and sale is. And then also, I find with business owners, they are so used to having control and purpose every single day as they, immerse themselves in their business, that really having discussions that are much more focused on how we rebuild that purpose in the next chapter is probably even more important than just the numbers and math behind it. Because for a lot of the business owners I work with, I find that initially it's that euphoria of, man, I've worked so hard, I need to move on. But anyone that's run a business, they typically have that mentality of go, 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 go. And if you don't think about how you're going to go in the next phase, emotionally, that's a really big impact to the identity. So I find that that's an even bigger conversation that I have with business owners than when I'm just doing personal financial planning is, hey, how do we find fulfillment if and when we do sell that business and move on?
So, you do talk to some people a little bit about exit strategies like that as well.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, you were helping people do this before at another firm. What made you decide to go independent and start Decima Wealth?
Yeah. So, the buzzword over the last couple of years, whether it's investing or business investment, is AI. And the push has been, how do we make things more efficient and how do we scale as quickly as possible? And I absolutely understand that from a revenue and a profitability standpoint. But over the last couple of years, I found that what was getting lost in that let's do as much as possible and let's make it efficient was really the human side of financial planning. So I found that, with all this efficiency, I was asked to meet with my client much less, go many more people an inch deep as opposed to fewer people a mile deep. And money and finance and retirement is just so unbelievably personal. It should not be about, hey, let's just create a McDonald's approach and serve as many people as possible. I want to know the families. I want to know the pain points. I want them to feel comfortable picking up the phone and calling me and me not having to go to AI and say, hey, I have 15 Michaels. Which one is this? And, what did we talk about last? So that was really the crux. I think the advantage of working for a large firm is I learned all the ins and outs of institutional wealth management. I learned the pitfalls. I learned what's available. And I had access to some of the best research and resources in the world. But that is meaningless if you can't connect with the person across the table. So I started this company to bring all of the experience and insight, but be able to spend as much time as it takes in the biggest moments, of people I care about's lives. And I'm just so happy I've done it. It's been a wonderful transition. It's less about math, right? And crunching numbers and more about, pain points. What are your biggest fears about your retirement or your wealth or your family? If you're not here and you can't do it, let's spend as much time making sure your spouse knows how to replicate this plan. So, yeah, that's why I went independent. It's not about being, efficiency is important. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to waste time and, you know, uh, just be inefficient. But I want to be able to go as deep as it takes with each person I work with.
Yeah, no, that's actually a fascinating answer. So you were kind of seeing like this big push towards technology, and that if in the name of efficiency, it was maybe taking away from like the connection relationship side of things for you.
Oh, unbelievable! And I'll give you so there's a study done, and you might have heard it, but the human brain, and again, there's exceptions to this, but the average human brain can only handle 150 meaningful connections before it starts to erode the ability to connect, right? Well, the major wealth managers are assigning 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 households. So if they're married, that's 3 to 4,000 people. And that doesn't include any of your own personal family, friends, network. So yes, it's efficient. They've pumped billions into technology and they've got Salesforce telling you every fact in detail. But it's not allowing people to really connect. And money is so emotional. If there's no connection, I can't truly create a plan that's aligned with your family's needs. So yeah, it's less is more in finance, and unfortunately, I feel the industry is going the other way. How do we get as many clients as possible? Uh, that just it didn't feel
Yeah.
right, so I went a different direction.
Yeah, and there's always gonna be a space for that, and then there's gonna be a space for folks who wanna, like, get to know you on a more personal level, right? And that human connection, I think, is always gonna have place, certainly. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, McDonald's is not a multi-billion-dollar company for no reason. There is a place for fast casual. Uh, but that doesn't mean everyone wants to eat at McDonald's every meal, right? And that's really why I've made the transition.
Perfect. So, what are the most common retirement blind spots you see with owners you know, who have most of their net worth in the business right now?
I think the biggest transition, and this is not just business owners, but it's anyone, but when you're working, whether it's through a business or through an employer, you have predictable salary or compensation coming in. So that allows you to take risk in other areas. And I think the biggest blind spot, if you think about not even just business owners, but let's take an executive, right? So let's say you have an executive and they have a paycheck, they're getting company incentives, they're getting bonuses, maybe they have an emergency fund, maybe they have a 401k, right? Um, but then you sell everything in your business or you retire and you've got one pot of money that you're asking to be the emergency fund, you're asking for it to be the long-term growth, you're asking for it to be the paycheck. And I think what people really don't realize is how emotional that becomes to manage it. When you're in charge of creating the cash flow, it really messes with our ability to evaluate risk appropriately. We tend to get very greedy when our neighbors are telling us about great ideas. We don't want to miss out on returns. And on the other side, when we should be getting greedy and buying, we get very fearful because every headline. So when we're working, we tend to be able to compartmentalize that because our cash flow and our risk is separated. In retirement, everyone lumps that together, and I think that's the biggest blind side. So I'd say that's number one. I think number two um, is just not realizing how incredibly important um, social connection is. So when you own a business or when you work for an employer, um, it has all of these social touch points throughout the day, even when you work remote. I mean, I was remote for the last couple of years, but I'm still on Zoom, I'm still on Teams, I'm still getting emails from everyone in the organization and all of these clients. Business owners are the same. They go in, they're meeting with people within their business, they're meeting with customers. And I think the biggest blind spot is when you retire initially, it's kind of that social battery recharge of, man, I can talk to who I want to when I want to, but I don't think many people realize just how important it is to proactively rebuild social connection in the next chapter. And the ones that don't tend to be isolated. And that's when I feel that this goes into the mental health, but I find the ones that can't replicate that social connection when they leave their company tend to be the ones that experience anxiety and depression in the next chapter. So that's not, hey, I don't have the money to do it. It's just they don't have the mental bandwidth to do it because they haven't rebuilt that framework that they were given every day within their company or within their job.
Yeah, that's a real interesting insight about that. Yeah, those are interesting blind spots you just brought up. Uh, when you are talking to an owner who has, a healthy business, like when would you tell them that they need to start planning for an exit if they want real options?
I think it depends on the size of the business. So, from a tax standpoint, there's some pretty unique tax strategies that, for example, the qualified small business stock, if you've had that stock for at least 5 years, it dramatically changes what capital gains you pay on the sale of the business. Well, you need at least 5 years of planning to make sure that switching from your current company structure to the structure that facilitates the small business stock. So I would say if you're truly thinking about selling, it needs to be at least 5 years before that final day. And perhaps even further than that to just make sure your accounting is in order. And we've had a ton of businesses that are incredibly profitable, but they've also been flowing all of their personal stuff. There's no separation. So they understand it. It's very lucrative to them. They've set themselves up in a great tax standpoint. But then trying to find someone to decipher that on the sale, valuations are just miserable. So
Mm,
the earlier you start to think about accounting and an exit plan, the earlier you start to think about tax strategies, I think the better. But I would say 5 to 7 years is where I see most of the owners I work with currently starting to really think about that.
mm. And how do you think about what would the approach be like when you want to have a conversation about selling a business versus keeping it and hiring an operator, for example?
Yeah, so I think it's what fills your cup, right? So sometimes it's about creating more time and opportunity for your family. So I just had a really interesting conversation with a guy that was looking to sell. And he wants to be out by 57. And the reason he wants to be out at 57 is unfortunately his father passed at 57. So he made a commitment to his wife to have free time to go and travel and be there for the kids for their activities. So he's already mapped out exactly what that next chapter looks like. So for him, it's not about an operator, it's about creating freedom to be with his family. Um, on the other hand, I have people that say, hey, I have absolutely no idea what I would do. Well, if you don't know what you're going to do and you're racking your brain and you can't think about that, well, owner operator still allows you to keep your hands in something that might give you a challenge and give you purpose. So I think it really depends on nothing to do financially, but really what that next chapter looks like in your plans. And if you're someone that's planning for maximum freedom and you can't disconnect from emails and phone calls and your spouse is yelling at you because you're glued to your phone, well, it doesn't matter if you hire an owner operator, you're still fully immersed, right? And that's where a sale is going to allow that to be a much more peaceful transition. On the other hand, if you can separate that, why not keep the cash flows? That's usually not a financial situation. That is 100% a how do you see your day being filled if you're no longer active in the business?
Yeah. So I want to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk kind of about investing in behavior. Owners of companies, executives, people like that are typically used to trying to control outcomes, right? How does that show up when they invest?
Um, so you are absolutely correct. Most executives and owners, they are used to influencing and controlling the way that they want things to go. So I think it shows up in two ways. One, I think it shows up where people are more likely, especially from business owner standpoints, they're more likely to invest in things that they can actually directly influence as opposed to throwing their money in things like, Apple, Nvidia, Amazon. They want something, whether it's real estate or another business or another project that generates money that they actually have a say in. So I see that much more common. From an executive standpoint, and this is not just executives and business owners, this is actually very common with doctors as well. I see this regularly with physicians. Um, but for years, they've been the smartest person in the room. And a lot of them feel that that translates to almost every aspect of what they do. So I feel one of the biggest challenges with investing is overestimating our own intelligence and ability to evaluate what makes the most sense. So I find that risk management, um, as they get older, they should essentially be taking their foot off the gas a little bit. And I actually see it the other way. They're increasing risk at the wrong times and they're reducing risk at the wrong times, just because of the ability to evaluate risk is a little bit skewed.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you come across quite a few personalities like that.
Yeah, and when you're used to making the decision, you're used to evaluating the risk for your business or your company. So it's natural to feel that that translates to investing. Um, but I think, and I'm guilty of this myself, when our own quality of life depends on the decision, emotions come into play, and not everyone recognizes that. For my clients that aren't senior executives or they're not doctors or they're not business owners, a lot of them raise their hand and admit, hey, I can't see my own blind spots. Um, I don't see that from executives and doctors. So, maybe they don't have blind spots, but it's a pretty consistent theme of, confidence, right? And that's good in a lot of aspects, but even the biggest companies have advisors and, top attorneys, top accountants, top financial advisors. So thinking about that from your personal lens, if your company needs that, is there a reason you as a successful individual don't need that? So being willing to take that advice, I think, is key.
Yeah.
Now, you
And
need good advice. That's key too. But, going out and
yeah,
finding someone that understands your business and understands your needs is what makes the difference.
just kind of related to that first question right there. What's your take on the biggest behavioral mistakes investors, owners, executives, these people that you advise when the markets are volatile?
So it's a little bit different for executives. So um, most executives I work with accumulated substantial wealth through concentrated risk, right? They're paid in company stock. Same with business owners. They're investing heavily into their one business, in most cases. Um, and in market volatility, um, they're exposed to more risk than they probably should be. So I think the biggest volatility risk is the quickest way to accumulate is through concentration. But once you've hit that finish line, you don't need to keep sprinting, right? So, if you run a marathon and you look at the victory lap, there's no one doing sprints out there, right? So, we don't need to do that with investing either. If we've amassed enough to have the life we want to live for our family, um, why subject ourselves to unnecessary risk? And I'd say that's something that a lot of executives have a really tough time pivoting from of, hey, this worked for me for decades and now all of a sudden it didn't. So in the final edits of my book, and I tell a story about a General Electric executive that I worked with. But he had $8 million, right? He's about to retire. He's a year out from retirement. This is a few years ago. General Electric stock dropped 50% in value, and he was still with the company. And he thought, hey, this is a once in a lifetime buying opportunity. So he took a margin loan out to buy more General Electric. It's a huge discount. Oh, General Electric goes down even further. and the margin loan gets called. So he takes out a home equity line on his house to pay the margin loan. Well, then GE lays him off. So he ends up losing his salary. All of his assets are down. His margin loan's called. His wife divorces him, so he loses the house. Um, Now, GE, if you look since that point, it's doubled. But taking risk at the wrong time, he may never retire. He lost, you know, $7 million in a period of about a year. 90% of his net worth and his home and his marriage. So that's a very unique story and a very one-off. But he believed in the company. He was intimately involved in the company. So I think the key here is even when we know something well, risk can have a really rough patch. And if we're taking that risk at times where we should not be taking the risk, it can be catastrophic. Um, I live in Florida, there's hurricanes all the time. No one wants to protect their home when the storm is already arriving, right? We can't get insurance once the storm is hit. We don't want to be putting sandbags out when the flooding is already here. That needs to be done before the storm arrives. And the biggest pain point, I think, for a lot of executives is um, they don't want to admit a storm might come, so they just don't prepare.
Yeah. No, you brought back a lot of memories of my, excuse me, my private wealth days when I was on those teams, and you have very high performing, very high earning people that we speak with, and they still want to take that same level of risk at the end, and we're like, oh, we're kind of like the preserve and protect mode right now. That's you built something amazing. Let's grow it steadily, but not nearly as bullish as they want to be sometimes.
Yeah, and I think, it's fascinating to me that, the people that have 1 million say they wish they had 3. People with 3 million say they wish they had 9. People with 20 million wish they had 50 million. So the common theme I see is everyone
Interesting.
keeps pushing the goalposts back, right? So, they're there. The end zone is right in front of them. They're about to score and they say, I'm not happy anymore. Let's move it back. Let's keep risking it. And instead of scoring, they end up fumbling, right? So, yeah, you nailed it. I think it's human nature. We want more, especially if we're a top performer. We're used to bending the will and getting more. So yeah, that's common.
Let's talk a little about your growth journey. What's been the hardest part of going from advisor inside a big brand to building your own?
I would say there's two components of that. One, when you work for a major institution, you inherently have the reputation, brand, and trust of that institution behind your name. So I was in a unique position where, as the tenured advisor working with, senior executives, I was turning away clients because I had so much, right? So it was just too much new opportunity. So that was a pain point in itself of I was just burning the candle at both ends. Well, now I don't have the reputation and brand of a major firm. So it's purely just my experience, my name, and my reputation. So that's definitely a challenge. Now, I think, what most people aren't aware of is it's not like I'm taking the money, right? I'm not Bernie Madoff where the money's in an account and I'm making the statements. I'm custodying the money at major, the two largest broker dealers in the world. So all the tax forms, all the statements, all the custody, the security is still the reputation and brand. But I don't think people are aware of that. Um, so I think that's a message that I could do a better job getting out. And then I would say the other thing is, when you work for a large institution, they're spending how many millions of dollars on commercials and advertising and all of that. And they have teams of the best marketers in the world to get their message out. And then here I am saying, I don't know who to pay or what is worth it. So, I'd say my worst investment is just lighting cash on fire, trying to figure out what marketing is worthwhile. Some of it works, but it's not my client segment. So my expertise is people within 5 years of retiring or in retirement. That's really where I excel. And then, I'll get a ton of leads from a marketing campaign I paid for. And it's a bunch of 30-year-olds looking for term insurance because they just had their first kids. Like, I don't even sell insurance. Right? How did that campaign about, protecting our retirement turn into a bunch of insurance leads? So I think that's a big challenge. Is I know nothing about marketing. And with that being said, every marketing salesman comes out of the woodwork saying how they can help you do it. And I don't know what I don't know. And, what I found out is marketers are really good at telling and selling exactly what they can promise, whether they deliver on that or not. But they all sound great. Um, so yeah, that's a huge learning curve for me as well. So I'd say branding and reputation, building that, but then also figuring out how to expand that message. Now, on the flip side of that, because it's a much more intimate practice, a lot of my business growth is through people that just really believe in what I do, and they're referring their neighbors, their friends, their family. So it's really taken the pressure. I've really, I don't want to say I've stopped marketing, but I'm doing it all in-house organically, and I'm not burning the cash that I was 6 months out of the gate. I mean, I was just lighting money on fire trying to figure that out.
Yeah. That does lead into my next question, which is how are you thinking about growth? You said referrals right now have been kind of a hot hand for you. What other things are there in terms of like content, seminars, partnerships, anything like that?
Yeah, so I typically do a monthly seminar, and most of them are around estate planning and tax efficiency. I normally do a lunch and a dinner each month. And that brings, about 60 people out, which is fantastic. It's a great way to get involved in the community. It's also, fun. I enjoy trying out new restaurants and hosting spaces. I typically do a monthly webinar on I've done probably a dozen different topics, everything from a market update to company benefit open enrollment. So a really, really wide range there. I have a website. I do a weekly blog. I do a weekly article. I have a YouTube channel. And then I just submitted the first draft of my book to an editor. So I think the way that I'm getting word out is the beauty of working for a large corporation is I was a regular keynote speaker and a regular contributor to a lot of the thought leadership. So being able to put that in my own words and deliver that in my own writing and my own videos, I find that really fun. So I don't know if it's going to translate to new clients finding me, but it's a wonderful way to spend time while I have calendar hours to spare.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been a really fascinating conversation. Um, I know, right? I'm right there with you in terms of what it takes to grow a business as a founder and entrepreneur, while having some deep expertise. And for you to be able to translate that now into your own firm is a real exciting thing, right? I'm sure there's fun conversations around the dinner table about like what's next and the future that you envision for yourself while helping other people really like preserve the dream that they built for themselves already, right? So thank you so much for coming on. I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell people how to reach out to you, how to learn more, anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, I really appreciate the opportunity. I think, for the first time in years, I'm revitalized. So whether it's retirement or starting a new business, it's a new chapter, it's a new adventure. So it is scary, but it's fun. For anyone interested, my website is www.decimawealth.com, and my YouTube channel is Decima Wealth.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brennan.
Yeah, Chris, thank you. Have a great holiday. Happy New Year.